And we are live. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the stream. I hope you are all doing well. I'm very happy to have you back again for another interview with a member of the European Parliament. We had our first one of the season a couple of days ago with an EPP MEP. Tonight, we will discuss with another MEP Ramona Strugariu from the Renew Europe group, so the center of EU politics. She's 43 years old. She has been a Romanian MEP since 2019, so it's her first mandate. Even if she will tell us about it, that she used to work in the parliament. But now she belongs to the Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs, and she's a substitute in the Committee on Inquiry to investigate the use of Pegasus and spyware, the Committee on Foreign Affairs, the Committee on Budgetary Control, and the Committee on no, she's no longer in petition. Sorry. In any case, within these committees, she works mostly on anti-money laundering, media freedom, the rule of law, and oversight on EU money, to give you an idea. But before we start our conversation, as usual, I remind the house rules for anyone who would be new with us tonight. So our guest will stay with us for about an hour. After that, she will go and enjoy the rest of your evening, while you will be stuck with me for another half an hour to discuss what you thought about the interview, provide additional context, answer additional questions, this sort of thing. As usual, I have prepared my own questions, but feel free to suggest your own question in the chat. It's there for that. But as usual, do that without spamming and while staying civil. And I will pick among your suggestions. So the goal of this interview is for you to better understand who your MEPs are, what they do, what they stand for in the EU, and hear about their opinion on their topic of expertise, but also on general EU political questions. So we will talk only about EU politics, so no national politics unless it's relevant to the EU. So keep that in mind when asking your questions. So on this note, I suggest that we start. Good evening, Ramona Strugariu. Welcome on the channel, and thank you very much for taking the time to be with us tonight. So you heard me do my little introduction right now. So is there anything that I missed or that you would like to add to your introduction?
Good evening. Thank you so much for the invitation, and greeting to everybody who's listening and looking at us. No, that was quite a comprehensive introduction, and I wouldn't add anything for now. But of course, if there are things coming up during the discussion, sure, I'll be happy to add things.
Okay, let's start then. Well, let's start by you actually. You're an MEP now, but how and why did you go into politics and later became an MEP? What's your story?
It's an interesting story because I never thought of becoming a politician. At the time, some years ago when I took the decision, I was actually quite upset with certain decisions of the system, and here I'm talking about my country, and that's basically something that happened within the system that determined me to take the step towards politics. But I was very interested in European politics, and I studied. I have a degree in European law. I was literally fascinated by the potential of the European Union, by everything that I could explore as opportunities and see as opportunities for my country as well. What I had in mind at the time was that you can change things by being part of the civil society or a group of expertise, working with international organizations, doing your part, and so on. Then I realized that big decisions come with politics. And if you can make a small change in a community, or if you can bring something which is really important, your contribution to society and so on, this is very complicated to keep or to bring to a higher level, or to turn into something with an overall impact, with a general impact, without politics. So more or less, with a very unfortunate event in my country, a huge fire in a club called Collective, where a lot of lives were lost, and where I felt that on the one hand, the government was not asking the European Union to support and help and intervene. although we had the civil protection mechanism and they could have done it. And on the other hand, that, obviously things were not going right there, and there was so much more to do and contribute in politics. I took the decision to move on, and I looked around a bit. I was not necessarily very satisfied with the political offer at the time. I thought that if I were to join politics, I should basically choose a new project. So immediately, almost immediately, the opportunity came, because there was that vibe, that need that we felt a bit everywhere in Europe, of a change, of something new, of fresh air. And it was reflected in the 2019 elections as well, because, over 60% of the MEPs that we have now in the European Parliament are new MEPs. So that was a moment where one could feel the vibe and the need for new and a fresh start in politics. So yes, here I am. I started from zero, from scratch. We built a new political project. It was with great results. It was with moments which were more difficult, but nevertheless, I continue in politics. I'm truly enjoying it until today.
Well, let's hope it continues. So now you're in the parliament as an MP. You work in Libe, it's your main committee, and in there you work a lot on the question of the rule of law. You were the shadow rapporteur on the report following the state of the rule of law in Hungary. So can you tell us a bit from the work you've done on this? How has the situation evolved over time in Hungary over the years? Where did it go worse? Where did it go better? If any area got better? What's the situation?
It didn't evolve. I don't know whether it's the right word for it. It actually worsened. And we do remember from the moment we triggered Article 7 and the Sargentini report that we've been constantly monitoring the situation in Hungary, whether we speak about academic freedom, human rights, any aspect, looking at the way European money was spent, media freedom, tolerance, diversity, migration, name a topic, and I could almost instantly mention measures or legislation or statements that were indicators that the situation is getting worse and it is not improving. And I think we were aware that things have been going wrong in Hungary for a while, but we decided to step in quite late. I don't know why we've waited for so long. It's a good question. There are always early signs of backsliding, I think, in any country. I'm not talking only about Hungary. There are situations. There's no such thing as a perfect democracy or democracy in itself. There's no perfect system.
Yeah.
But it's the best of all.
It's the least worst of them.
Yeah, well, I would say the best of all existing ones.
That's Churchill saying that, not me.
Yeah. Nevertheless, now with this report, we are basically stating very, very clearly that the council has to move on, and then we have to take a very clear decision on Article 7 procedures and on sanctions, and that every single day where you see the lack of decision and the lack of political willingness towards a government, I wouldn't say a country, because there are a lot of people there who are fans of democracy and of human rights and of the European Union, but towards a government which is not following EU rules and which is not acting and behaving as, like they're part of the union and part of the games of the game, is a bad day for democracy overall and a bad day for the union overall. So there's this thing that, acting with impunity should really, it's a very bad idea, and something that can instantly create a snowball effect and can
worsen and
show
worsen.
other government exactly, and other governments as well. Hey, I can do that, and I can take these measures because look, nothing is happening, and we're fine with that. So unfortunately with Hungary, this is the case. There's no magic recipe. Obviously, I think that the people from Hungary are the ones having a decision in their hands in time, and they have to become more and more aware that the best interest of Hungary and their best interest is to have a government who is literally preoccupied by the rule of law and by democracy and by fundamental rights and by freedoms and by the everything that the European Union means, all of these values.
Which brings me actually to my next question. You said that the report calls the council to move on with Article 7, so the sanction against Hungary. There's also Poland with the same situation, but we see that in council the situation is stuck because basically we have Poland and Hungary that are using their respective veto to protect each other. So council for now is stuck. So given the situation in council, do you see any possible ways to improve the situation without going through Article 7, or are European condemned to just wait for Fidesz to be beaten in elections and Hungarian to move on with the situation?
Well, we have other means as well. You always have the infringement procedures. We do have the conditionality mechanism, and there the Commission has advanced quite significant steps. And we're now looking at the end of September and waiting for some further actions of the Commission, and we wait to see their proposals, sanctions. We are within the game. We're taking the steps within the regulation. So of course there are ways where one can intervene, and the union can intervene, but it's still a huge pity. And to trigger such means and think of such mechanisms when the government could simply understand and cooperate. That's something that is beyond my understanding. You are there to represent the interests of your people. You are there with a mandate which is stronger than some personal view interest, or it's if to some point you may have as a person sensibly different opinions, once you are a leader, you are no longer in your own personal skin.
Mm-hmm.
You represent someone, and you are leading a nation, and you are taking decisions for a nation. It goes the same for a government, prime minister, ruling parties, and so on. So this is where your attention should be oriented, and this is where you should stay focused. But difficult to understand. We have very strong statements from Mr. Orban, very strong statements. The latest ones come from Romania. They were made in Romania.
Okay.
About
indeed.
The purity of races and so on. Well, this is something that does not belong to the European Union. It doesn't belong to this modern world.
And speaking of which, since these comments by Orban were made in Romania, were there reaction from the Romanian public opinion, or did it go under the radar there?
There were very strong. No. There were very strong reactions. We had statements coming from our from very strong, very powerful ones from the both public and the civil society. There were statements of our Romanian members of the European Parliament, from our government. It actually made a huge noise in Europe in general. So there were plenty of reactions. There was also a statement of the Conference of Presidents of the European Parliament related to that story.
And going back to Hungary and also to Poland, because you made a comment that was interesting, that you need to differentiate between the government and the people. And as it happens, we see that Polish and Hungarian people elect time and time again Fidesz and the PiS to the government, who have constantly a very anti-EU campaign that they blame for everything. But then when we look at the opinion polls from people, we see at the same time Polish and Hungarian people are very attached to the EU, and they actually have
Exactly.
they are in the top 10 people, the top 10 Europeans who have the most trust in European institutions. So how do you explain this contradiction?
There's not only one explanation to that. I would say it's propaganda. A lot of it. I would say there's, a lot of media capture in both of these countries. It really depends on how the information
Gets to people, yeah.
gets to people. It really depends on free and fair elections, and what are the opportunities that the candidates actually get to present their electoral platforms, and what visibility they have, and so on. I do have examples from Hungary, for example, coming from my own colleagues in Momentum when they campaign in Hungary, so I know exactly how this hate campaigns, a lot of unbalanced in their chance of presenting things and electoral publicity and so on, compared to Orban and PiS and Fidesz. Probably to some degree the same goes with PiS, but what was very interesting to me, because I recently came back from Poland from a mission of the Budgetary Control Committee, is that, first of all, obviously Poland has islands of democracy, and it has big cities which are breathing a very European air. Then there's a huge difference in messages between what comes directly from the government or representatives of the government, and here it was striking the kind of discussions that we had, for example, with the Ministry of Justice, and the messages coming from the people, their openness, their support for the European Union, their attitude towards the refugees in Ukraine, their expectations. Poland is a great country, and they have developed so well using European money. And this is something that they know how to do. Really, they are an example to give in for Europe, for the whole Union. So to a certain degree, they are, to a huge degree, I would say they're direct beneficiaries of the contribution of the European Union. But then the mind twists that come along with propaganda are not to be ignored, not at all. And there are several factors stepping in there. It's not only, it's a whole apparatus, a whole system that's convincing people that this conservative system is a good idea, and here they would really have to in time realize that that's not the best option by far for Poland, and same with Hungary. Maybe it's interesting to add that Romania has been through very difficult times as well, and we did have backsliding, and people went to the streets to protest against dramatic changes to the legislation and so on. And we were in the attention of the European Parliament as well some years ago. And I do remember at the time, during the LIBE debate about what is happening in Romania and what is happening with the justice system, that the commissioner in charge for the rule of law told us that the antibodies of democracy are always in that country. And it is, every nation builds its future, and it needs to produce these antibodies. It's very, very important that we ensure pluralism, and that whatever political force that could oppose this kind of political abuse and backsliding has to grow, and that media has to stay powerful, and that the civil society needs to fight and the professional associations need to fight, particularly for those reasons, because you need to heal and you need to have these antibodies within your own country. Yes, European Union could step in to some extent. Yes, of course, there are things that can be done, but in the end, it is those people deciding what kind of future they choose.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a bit about your other main committee, the Cont Committee. So first, the Budgetary Control Committee, as the full name. Can you a bit explain what concretely do MEPs do in this committee? Because it's not a committee like the other; it has a very specific task. So could you explain a bit what Cont is there for?
Yes, there are several things that we're doing. We're monitoring expenditure of European funds, and that's really interesting. We are doing what we call the discharge procedure as well, and this is where that's mostly my area, which means that we're looking into how every single institution of the European Union is spending their money. But it's not only that. It's basically an overall audit on their activity, on transparency issues as well, on all of the rules and the European rules that they have to follow, staff regulation, everything. And we, based on this analysis, we grant or we do not grant this discharge for a budgetary year. And I can tell you that it's a fascinating experience every time, because we are entitled to look for and ask for information from each and every institution, and check and make sure that going through, of course, their annual reports and the reports of the Court of Auditors and so on, and make sure that they comply with the rules and they properly do their job. And we have situations where there are plenty of examples of good activity and compliance, but we also have a lot of examples where things are not properly working. And the most recent example that comes to my mind is Frontex, for example, where we're having discussions right now for the second time, actually, whether to grant or not discharge for the agency, which is the largest agency of the European Union. And then I think the Budgetary Control Committee, with this really broad overview on what we call European expenditure and public money, has a crucial role, because you can do, and I was one of that was proposing analysis and studies on how we can counter fraud at European level, for example, with EU money. We are constantly going on missions to see what is happening on the ground and whether this money is properly spent. And then we really keep a close eye on your pockets, on the European citizens' pockets, very simply and briefly said, which is very, very, very important exercise, I think. We do care, and everybody should care about how public money and how European money is spent, because each and every one of you is a contributor to that.
And you mentioned it, so currently you're looking to Frontex because there's been quite a lot of problem with Frontex. There's been an OLAF report, a Court of Auditor report on misuse of money and problems within Frontex. But another thing that, and you're discussing now whether to grant or not the discharge, but another thing that made the news within Court was actually about the Court of Auditor itself. So the paradox is the Court of Auditor is the institution that is supposed to look after EU money, and apparently there's been a news report that apparently the president of the Court of Auditor was misusing money. And earlier this year, Cont had advised the Parliament to reject the discharge, but the plenary overruled Cont and said, no, actually we're going to give the discharge to the Court of Auditor despite all the observations that were made. So, what is your analysis of the Parliament, the plenary overturning the recommendation of Cont? Is there really a problem in the Court of Auditor? Was it overblown? What's your point?
That's the complexity of politics. We, as a budgetary control committee, clearly stated our position, and I do remember the discussion. Also, I think it's really important to mention that the reaction of the budgetary control committee when we received all of those informations, and again, the Court of Auditors is one of the institutions of the union. It has to follow the same rules. It really doesn't matter, right? It looks, or it has itself a role of monitoring and analyzing and so on. It has to follow the same rules. So when all of this information reached us, we asked for answers that there were long lists of questions submitted to the Court of Auditors for details for a set of measures to be implemented immediately. So it was obvious that without them having implemented those measures and without them fulfilling all of those requirements, the decision would have been taken in such a way. But they did. I did keep an eye. I was not a rapporteur for the file, but I did keep an eye in there, and I know the discussions, and I know how they answered, what they submitted, how they complied with our requirements. So, I would not say that was a dramatic situation when the willingness of the Cont committee or the conclusions of the Cont committee were dramatically overturned by the decision of the plenary. It was a process. And then they basically fulfilled what we asked them to do, and then you saw the decision ultimately.
Something actually, maybe we skipped a bit a stage. We are talking about discharge, but what happens if the Parliament refuses the discharge to an institution? What does it mean concretely?
Well, first and foremost, it is a really, really powerful political statement, and also it's basically no if you want a similarity, no closure of accounts. This kind of decision also comes along with proposals of freezing a part of the budget of that institution, or diminishing parts of the budget, or and this also needs to be coordinated with other committees as well. But it is, first of all, a big red spot on the reputation of that institution, and nobody wants that, I can assure you. So each and every institution that I've been working with is very careful with this whole procedure and wants to fulfill all of the requirements, and they just want to be sure that they would rather be an example than someone who's in trouble with the discharge procedure. And then there can be concrete budgetary consequences afterwards with complementary decisions in terms of financing that institution, or providing or not supplementary budgets and so on. It is also the Parliament approving new expenditure, and we are involved in this. We always ask in our report, and they every time an increase is needed or more staff is needed, or these kind of things that the agency needs, they come to us and they count on our support. And we do have, for example, the Budgetary Control Committee, as well as the LIBE Committee, they have always supported the European agencies, and particularly the Justice and Home Affairs agencies. So they know that whenever they need a strong supporter, they can find a strong supporter there, provided that, of course, they follow the rules. Requirements, yeah. Yes, they follow the rules, and the requirements are
fulfilled, yeah.
Justified and so on. But when they make mistakes, or when we have very complicated situations to handle, and when the agency is involved, then it's otherwise. And it's not about friends and enemies of any institution or agency. It's just about analyzing the situations and taking the right decisions for the citizens first and foremost, and then for that institution.
Still on the topic of misuse of money, you're part of an intergroup, the Anticorruption Intergroup. So Can you briefly explain what is an intergroup? Because it's not a normal committee, it's something more informal. So what's an intergroup? What does it do?
It is still an official structure of the European Parliament, but we're basing it has a board. I'm part of the board of the Anticorruption Intergroup, and we're trying to. It really depends. There are several on different areas. It really tries to gather representatives, political representatives from different groups, with a focus on a certain theme, let's say. It's quite topical. And here, with the intergroup, you can organize debates. You can issue all kinds of policy proposals and documents and recommendations and guides and so on. Our intergroup actually was quite active on that. And even at the beginning of the pandemic, we've had a long list of recommendations in terms of countering corruption and properly monitoring what is happening with the money, because you know that there were a lot of concerns on how governments are spending this money and how they use it during the pandemic, and so on. I believe it's very useful because it shows how people from various political parties and political groups can really get together in an area that is extremely important for the citizens, because you know the vote is really political. I mean, when you are in the classical scheme of things, each and every political group expresses their interest, and then there are heavy negotiations and so on. An intergroup is not about that. An intergroup is, you know, we have everybody on board from each political group almost, and then the decision is really rapid, and you find points of agreement on a certain line to be followed and on the political messages really quickly. And this is nice because you would not see that split in an ideology or certain approaches when it comes to corruption, and when it comes to fighting corruption, for example. The language there is quite clear, and the beauty of it is that it always shows people that apart from ideology or certain political interests, when you do have a strong theme catalyzing people, you can do a lot of things with that, and it's something that, you know, it's advisable. There are subjects that which are divisive, and there are topics where we should be a lot more united than we even are now. And you know, European solidarity, for example, there are many examples. Health, within education and health, because these things are areas where we need more competences, obviously. And the conclusions of the Conference for the Future of Europe is that we have to have more competences in this area. Here, I think the, you know, political language and attitude related to a certain ideology or another should be less powerful, and the actions and decisions taken together to improve a certain area should be prioritized.
Yeah. And so concretely, so as part of, whether as part of this anti-corruption intergroup or your own work on money laundering, what concretely do you push for on these policies?
Where should I start?
The most concrete things.
If we talk about the money laundering, for example, now we have since last year in the summer a new and quite consistent proposal of the Commission to refresh a bit the framework for fighting money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism, because we've seen that basically the European directives that we had so far didn't properly work for several reasons. They were transposed to some point by each and every government on their own understanding about how they should have been transposed. So there was no coherence really. It was funny because we kept having these discussions in the plenary and in the committees as well. Nobody properly transposed the current framework in countering money laundering, and particularly the fourth directive. And we need more harmonization and stronger rules and proper structures to fight money laundering. So now we have the proposal. I'm responsible for 3 of these 4 files, which are actual legislative proposals. I'm responsible for AMLA, which is the anti-money laundering European authority that we're trying to create. So we're basically creating a new authority fighting money laundering. I'm responsible for the regulation, which is mostly addressing the private entities with rules of compliance and with clearer means of fighting money laundering, more transparency, and so on. And also, I'm responsible for the 6th directive, which of course addresses the public system, the institutions, the government. And there, I think it's a very, very important battle to fight, because the governments need to get themselves together and cooperate more and have efficient structures as well. Otherwise, it's very hard. Look, the money laundering basically means hurting people's pockets, destroying lives, destroying communities. Using all of this money comes from illegal activities. This is what it means. Mm-hmm. It's money coming from illegal activities, whether we speak about, I don't know, selling drugs or trafficking human beings or whatever, that are then further washed, literally, and invested in and circulated and invested, or maybe they're refinancing other illegal activities. And this is huge. There are very, very complex networks within the union, and there's a very strong relationship with third countries. A lot of third countries are laundering money in Europe, and people from third countries. So the union cannot fight it unless we have strong rules and strong implementation of the rules. And of course, law enforcement, which is efficient, financial intelligence units which cooperate with each other, platforms that they can use for gathering information, more transparency on beneficial ownerships and so on, ownership and so on. This is some of the proposals that I, for example, because you asked me concretely, so what do you do in these files? I'm writing amendments to all of them. We're making legislation, and we come with proposals of improvement for the draft of the commission. So at this point, at least for these 3 files, because the other one was actually on crypto assets, that was it's closed. The negotiations are finished, but the position of the parliament in this file and the position of Renew Europe, because I'm part of Renew Europe, is, I would say, extremely powerful. So we're taking literally steps forward with quite a courageous approach to that. And you can't make it otherwise. When we discuss with the council, you will always see there, member states with different positions. Some people say, hey, we don't need such a strong framework because things are going well, and we do have our own
system, so we don't need additional.
And so on. Others are, and that's not news to you. Others are involved there were stories of people, also politicians, involved in all kind of illegal activities and so on. So it's complicated. It's really a matter of political will, but also of enforced rules and harmonizing and having a single rule book and a powerful framework for countering money laundering. And it's about cooperation also with the governments, also with the entities which need to comply. And I know that the banks are exhausted, and there are plenty of entities which are looking for clarity, and they've written to us and they lobby for clarity. But my nice surprise was that I expected more. I expected from certain entities more reluctancy, let's say. And the truth is that while working for this legislation and in these files, when we were discussing thresholds for cash payments, when we were discussing the cooperation within the financial intelligence unit, when we were discussing rules of compliance for the banks and what they have to do, reporting and so on, the transparency, all of the rules for the final beneficiaries, the single register, or whether we go towards a European register, for example, all of these details, my feeling was that they were rather interested in really having more coherence and clearer rules than in advancing the idea that this new framework is not such a great thing and that we don't need it, which I was impressed about. I mean, I think really there is a strong need for that. We just need to make sure that we are, we surgically intervene where it's necessary, or we bring clarity and stricter rules where it's needed, and so on. We didn't have such harsh reactions, and that's a really good sign for me. This means that this is really expected, needed, and we just need to move on and move forward with it.
Okay, interesting. Moving on a bit on a different topic. You're also in the EU delegation interparliamentary delegation for Moldova. Moldova has received a few months ago now the status of candidate country to join the EU. So something that would have been unthinkable a few years ago, I think it's fair to say. So this is of course occurring in the context of the war in Ukraine, but how much do you think Moldova owes its new status as a candidate country to the war in Ukraine, and how much does it owe it to its own efforts and reform to actually join the EU?
I think it's a combination. You can't answer this in simple, or very very clear.
No, it's not all one or the other, but
it was unthinkable that Moldova and Ukraine would become candidate countries a few months ago, not only a few years ago. Because all they want and the other were part of the association agreement and doing their homework and so on. There was still some steps to be taken, but usually the situations of war and generally speaking crisis are also a huge opportunity of growth. And they reveal certain things that were not maybe very obvious in the eyes of politicians before. And in times of peace, we skip things. We don't see their importance or their necessity and so on. What happens with Moldova is that on the one hand, they are in a unique situation now. Why do I say this? They have an exceptional leader. The president of the Republic of Moldova is a well-respected leader with a European caliber. The doors were open instantly when they started to advocate for Moldova's membership. She was trusted by the European leadership, and she is trusted by the European leadership. She has very pro-European views. Then Moldova has a very good team in the government. I mean, they do have excellent people, educated, a lot of them in the European Union. They do a good job following the agenda of reforms. They've accelerated, and they are proving that they deserve to be part of the European Union one day. And then they do have the majority in the parliament to basically support, adopt and support all of these measures. So they have everything they need to advance and to
move forward.
or to move forward and to take all of these steps. And then, yes, the situation, which is regrettable with the war, brought for both of these countries, and it would have brought it for Georgia as well, but there were more complex problems there, this opportunity to come closer. Because I think that the Union also needs that pro-European attitude of the people in these countries, and that fresh air and that support from governments. We do need some support, from new governments joining this project, because the current governments are not now even all of them supporting what is happening.
Yes.
Some of them are not so enthusiastic with the current framework. We need each other. Plus, that Moldova already has over 1 million European citizens. I don't know if you know that, but
no, I didn't.
Basically, over 1 million, they're already European citizens. Some of them, a lot of them have Romanian citizenship as well. It's a country with like 2.6 million people. It's about the size of a land in Germany.
So about half of the country is already European?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We just need to make it official. We need to make it official. This is an information that is not necessarily widely known, but those people are, they've been traveling abroad a lot. Some of them are part of the diaspora. Some of them are in Romania, where they do have Romanian citizenship as well. They are already, and they have been connecting already the Republic of Moldova to the European Union a lot, and they can help, of course, push the country themselves. We're not talking only about the government, let's say, or we're not talking only about the parliament. There's a potential there that needs to be used, and they can definitely understand, appreciate, and do something with the support that we offer them. So it's well worth investing there, because we'll have, plenty of return.
And concretely now, how much time do you expect it would? Well, do you think it will take before Moldova then becomes a full member of the EU?
It depends on their progress. Not only on their progress, but I think it also depends on the whole context that we're in. But they have a pretty good chance to advance I would say that quite fast.
Are we talking 5 years, 10 years?
I wouldn't speak in terms. I don't know. It could be 5 years. It could be 4 years. It could be 6 years. 10, I don't know.
Okay.
Look, we were so supportive. I really hope that it's quickly, because I can see how things are moving, and they're moving well. They, of course, still need to address certain issues, but now they have the opportunity to work with the European Commission and with all of us on each chapter, very structured, with a very clear agenda, with all of the financial instruments that can help them, because now they can access them as a candidate country. So this changes things. It could be sooner, a few years, or it could take longer, but I would rather say that it would be sooner, and I hope it would be sooner. It, like I said, of course, depends on also the situation in Ukraine. I don't think that we will have an approach of somebody being left behind, because it's both of them being granted this status of candidate country. But let's see. Now, I think there's also a discussion, and it's a really important discussion, of a serious overview on how those countries who received candidate status progressed, what they did with the money, what the situation is today. Let's look a bit at the Western Balkans. Let's look a bit at the other countries which have association agreements. And it would not be a bad idea at all to use that principle of differentiation, and apply the rule more for more and less for less, for example, because there was some quite complex analysis showing that there are countries where there was like almost zero progress, and that there are countries which are so which are moving fast and which are so eager to join and which are showing that they're eager to join with actual steps and with actual, with action that they're taking. And they do deserve to receive more if they do more. That's quite
I see what you mean.
that's you have a package approach, and then you have this
individualized more approach.
Fair analysis, looking at who did what, and then maybe those who actually did things deserve more. And I think this is something that would be great for the Republic of Moldova, for example, because if they do more, they could receive more faster.
Yeah, if they are eager and they show it, no reason to artificially let them behind. I will,
and I hope that the decision making will be as follows, as such.
I'm looking at the time. I still have a few questions, so I will move on quickly to the next topic I want to discuss. I actually had a question from someone from Romania who was asking what are the main power strings that Romania has in the EU? How influential is Romania?
Could you?
I
heard like 2 words out of 3.
Sorry. How influential is Romania? What are the power strings that Romania can use to be influential in the EU?
A lot of them. I'm not sure that we're properly using all of them, but we are the 6th. Look at the European Parliament. We're the 6th delegation in size. We have 33 MEPs. Some of them are quite active, and I'm glad to see that at least with this mandate now, things are moving, and at least my colleagues, I'm speaking, about the renewed delegation, have had a clear word to say. I mean, my colleague Dragoș Păslaru was negotiator for RRF. This is something that was basically crucial,
very important,
for serving and for recovery after the pandemic. I have colleagues who are leading or who led the special committees on artificial intelligence. Major legislation is now in their hands. They continue to work on that. So yes, we can be very influential, at least at European level, and I think we are very influential. I've from other political groups as well, and I can think of Zicrit Mureșan, for example, which is part of EPP, who's doing great on these European issues, and you can see that this kind of representation definitely makes a difference for Romania. So we are using it today, and we should use it more and more, because we have all of the credentials that we need. Like I said, at least in European politics, nobody should stop us if we properly use all of this resource. And to some extent it's being used, and then for the rest I can only hope that national politics as well understands the importance of this influence, gets more involved, negotiates better, uses its strings here better, and the people here, so that we can be as influential as one can be. You also have to do your homework as a country all the time in order for others to respect you and to consider you a player.
Mm-hmm.
And here Romania still has things on the agenda on the one hand. On the other hand, like I said, people are very pro-European. They are fully committed to this idea of a strong European Union. We have resource which is making a difference everywhere in Europe and in the world. If we look at Romanian names at NASA, or Romanian names in some of the most important research institutes and scientific organizations and so on in the world, I would say that it is a duty for the political scene to use this and to better exploit this potential that that Romania has.
Next week is the big political the speech of the year. It's the state of the European Union. What do you expect and hope from the speech of Ms. von der Leyen next week?
Answers to what is urgent now. The energy crisis, food crisis, and I can tell you that the discussions are quite hot in the European Parliament and complex as well. I would expect to see a very citizen-oriented speech with what concretely the Union can do so that all of these people make it for the winter and then next. Because we do need a short-term plan and we do need a long-term plan, which has to become more and more clear. This is what people expect. It's not necessarily that we're talking about my expectations as a politician or somebody else's expectation. This is what the people of the Union expect to hear. And we do have answers. I mean, there are solutions. Whether we discuss about, capping the price for the Russian gas, whether we discuss about translating more what European solidarity means in terms of energy solidarity. What does it mean, and how we can help each other, and so that we so that we don't have a major crisis and everybody makes it well. Then more responsibility on our side and more responsibility on the government side as well. And then the green agenda, and then what it means to diversify and to become independent in terms of energy resources, and then how the storage looks like today and what we have to do tomorrow and then after tomorrow, so that we make sure that we properly store these resources, but bring new resources without depending on Russia. We are receiving about 9% now volume coming from Russia. This is not to be ignored, and it's great, but we need more than that, and we also need to be firm and to continue our relationship or our messages towards Russia in a manner that makes them understand that what is happening now is unacceptable at every single level, not only political, but every single level. And I think that if we move well, as a union and as a structure that is based on values and solidarity, we can make it. But I expect to hear these proposals in the speech, and I expect to hear these messages coming from President von der Leyen, and I expect to see them translated into the decision of the member states all together. This is crucial.
Final, last couple of questions, this time a bit more meta, let's say. If you could snap your fingers, you change anything about the EU, what do you change and why?
I would make it a federation.
Oh, actually, you anticipate my final question. I was going to ask you, where do you stay on federal Europe? So, okay, you transform it directly.
I do believe in a federal Europe. I do.
And
I do. It's something that we should never cease to fight for. Because every single situation that we've had so far showed that we're so good when we are together. And in a crisis like the pandemic, and in a crisis like now, the energy crisis, or whatever happens, nobody can make it on their own. Be it France or Germany or Italy or Portugal, or nobody can make it on their own. And this is, for me, a very clear reason that we should continue this project and strengthen the relationship between the member state and the project itself with a federative umbrella. I'm pretty sure that one day we will get there. And I think this is the future. I think the more we stay together, the more the better. And this is how we were able to preserve peace on this continent that was devastated by two wars, by staying together and by building step by step an economic union and then moving towards a union on values and so on. Let's just continue doing that.
Okay. Before we conclude, then my very final question, like if people are to remember one thing from tonight's interview, what would be your message to them? The one thing that they have to get home with?
It is a message that I didn't give tonight yet, but it is a message that I would love to give. I trust the future of this union because I see the new generation coming, and I believe in their incredible capacity of fighting for the values of the European. I do believe in this. It's all of we call youth, the younger generation. And I would really love to see them involved as much as possible. I would love to see them voting since they're 16. I would love to see them deciding about their own future. I think it's crucial for us. And the vote of the young people changed and the faith of Europe somehow in 2019, and their presence brought this really, really fresh air that I was talking about. This is the most powerful weapon against populism, against extremes, against ultranationalism. It comes with a new generation, it comes with young people, and it also comes with our understanding that only united we can, basically.
Well, that's very clear and fine for me. Thank you very much, Ramona Strugariu, for taking the time to answer our questions tonight. Chat, make sure to thank her. You can follow her on Twitter. You have the ad below a video feed. I hope you enjoyed your first experience on Twitch, Mrs. Strugariu, and I wish you a good evening, and maybe we will see you in the future on the channel again.
With pleasure. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye. All right, chat, stay with me. We are going to do the debrief. Let me do my thing. I'm putting aside my my little piece of paper so I can listen. I can look at the notes. What I will do is I will throw you. I'm sorry about that. An ad. That way we can have a full discussion. So if you will have. Sorry, I'm just finishing Zoom right now. I throw at you a 30 seconds ad, and then we continue the conversation. So see you in 30 seconds. And in the meantime, I can put the camera. Where are you, camera? You are there. Hello, camera. Come here. Hey. All right, 20 seconds. I don't know if there are subscribers here right now who don't have to see the ads. Good reason to be subscribed. You don't see the ads, even if I throw them at you. Up. Oh, let's wait for 5 seconds. All right, we are back. Sorry about that. As always, it's about gaining time without having extra ads. So now, since it was like transition between the interview and the debrief, I thought it was a good moment to give a break. So, interesting interview. I don't know why these last couple of interviews, like I had time to ask far less questions than usual. Like I need to reassess my time management, I guess, for this season. But anyway, it was still interesting. So, what did we talk about that was interesting? A stat that I don't know if we discussed that in the past already. She mentioned that in 2019, so this mandate, there was 60% of new MEPs. So 60% of MEPs, first time they are in the parliament, which of course had a big impact because of course it brings, let's say, fresh blood to the institution, but also it means that it's 60% of MEPs who are discovering completely the way, to an extent, European politics, but also the way Parliament works, the dynamic, etc. And this plays a role also. This is also impacted because, if you remember, there was a COVID crisis, and 6 months after the beginning of the mandate, for basically 1 year and a half, people could not set foot in parliament, which of course had a big impact on the ability for MEPs to do their job and how they can discuss with each other. So it was the fact that you had 60% of new MEPs that made things very complicated for the work, because 6 months after they found themselves in a new way of doing politics, which has had its own advantage, because that meant that they could stay at home and work whenever they could. They didn't have to take the train to or the plane to go to Brussels, to go to Strasbourg, etc. They could work from home and be active all the time. But at the same time, that meant that they couldn't see their colleague, they couldn't discuss informally with their colleague, or much more it was more difficult. They couldn't have contact with their team. So it made the day-to-day work of the parliament much more challenging and very different than what I would say regular parliament is, where you have a lot of emphasis on informal dialogue between MPs, which is facilitated when people are physically in the same building. They run across each other in committee, in the corridors. They go have lunch, they go have dinner, they go have the coffees together, all this type of thing. And so for 1 year and a half, suddenly these 60% of new MPs had to learn a different way, and when they came back to the parliament 1 year and a half later, they had to relearn again the things that they couldn't do for a year and a half. So I would say that made it, on top of the COVID crisis, a very peculiar kind of mandate. They still have like a year and a half, 2 years, let's say 2 years to be generous, until the next election to make it count. But that for sure was a very unusual mandate on that. What did we discuss? We discussed Article 7, so rule of law, of course. So she was one of the MEP involved in the assessment of the rule of law in Hungary. So she said that situation actually worsened. There was no improvement. She mentioned as well like the flurry of very problematic statements from Viktor Orban over the past few years. I mean, she reminded the comments on the race purity that Orban did in a few months ago, which of course triggered outrage in the EU, and had to walk back to an extent by saying, yeah, no, but I didn't mean racial purity. I meant the cultural purity, which doesn't make it that much better. But yeah, he tried to walk back a bit on things after the backlash all around on this, and also the fact that he had his own people in government turning against him on this. What else did we talk about? I note cities versus campaign on EU. Yes, because when we were talking about Poland, she was saying, yeah, we have in Poland like big cities where people are very pro-European. Politicians there tends to be pro-European, etc. And on the contrary, you see that in the countryside, people are less Euro-enthusiastic, let's say, and a bit more critical about things. Why does it want to give me more ads? I don't want ads. I thought I gave you ads. Well, we'll deal with that later. So yeah, all that to say that there's a correlation between where you live in terms of are you in a city, are you in the countryside, and the opinion that you may have about the EU. And you see that in Poland, in Hungary, but also pretty much all around the EU. That's let's say a trend, let's say, that connected to demographics and all that. We discussed about committee that we did not discuss a lot since in any interviews, as far as I can remember. It's the Con Committee, so the committee that is in charge of assessing whether EU money was used properly by EU institutions. Basically, does Frontex use money correctly? Does the Court of Auditor use EU money correctly? Does the Council use money correctly? So all that is assessed by the Parliament, by the Con Committee, who assess that, and also the The council also has a look at this. And they grant every year what is called the discharge. The discharge is basically the parliament saying, okay, your accounts are cleared, go on. We make some they make some recommendation to improve things here and there, but still, that's how it works. It's politically interesting, I would say. Why? Because, like she said, when the parliament does not give the discharge or threatens not to give the discharge, it sends a big political message, of course, because it's the official recognition that you're misusing EU money, which is not exactly the best reputation you want to have as an institution, which means that well, you won't be given extra money, and you have to do an extensive amount of let's say reforms and changes to get back on track. It's also a political tool for relations between EU institutions, because a classic, something that happens every single year. So the parliament, as part of the discharge, is supposed to give the discharge to the council. It's supposed to say, did the council use EU money properly? And the parliament, the council also looks at the way parliament is using money. And something that happens every year is the parliament refuses to give discharge to the council, or at least is withholding consent, as a way to put pressure on the council. Because the way they do this is they say, oh, well, we're not certain about whether council use the money properly. We need maybe to have a look further on that. Which, of course, is pissing off the council, even if they know they do that every year. Despite the fact that they have a gentleman's agreement with the parliament, because the sort of deal between the council and the parliament is that they can look at each other's accounts, but they don't mess with each other. So basically, parliament is supposed to leave the council pretty much alone on how it uses its money, and in return, the council more or less leaves the parliament alone when it comes to the use of its money. That's let's say the deal between the two institutions, so that nobody is messing with the other, or right or good reason, right or wrong reason. That's another debate, but that's how it is. And so Parliament, despite this, every year says, "Oh well, I'm not going to give you the discharge. I'm not sure. I need to look at it." And actually, it's the Parliament doing that to piss off the council, because it's always good to piss off the council. But most importantly, as leverage. They do basically they will use that as leverage in another political fight, usually the budget, if they can, in a fight with the council, and they will say, okay, council, if you give us that, well, maybe we'll be lenient on your discharge and we'll grant you the discharge. So every year is the same thing. The council asks discharge to the parliament says, I need to look at it. It drags on for a few months, and then following a political deal on something that is completely unrelated to the account of the council, Parliament gets something and says, "Oh well, okay, fine, we will give you the discharge to we'll give the discharge to the council," and everyone is happy except the council, who doesn't like it. Especially when he sees how Parliament use its own money, but he's not allowed to say anything. So. That's always a classic, and discharge is it's done like once a year. So every year in October you have the discharge that are voted all together, and it's a nightmare, because like you have to imagine that there is, for each agency, for each institution, there is a different discharge. Discharge is basically saying the parliament says accept the discharge, or the parliament has this recommendation. So that's a different file, meaning that in October you have suddenly, I think it's around 50 new reports that are dropped on the parliament and say, okay, you have to vote on 50 additional files, so it becomes a complete mess, because you have to deal with 50 additional files. All of a sudden, it takes an entire plenary basically to go through the discharge, and once it's done, then you won't hear about Comte for another year. Comte, the main purpose of Comte is to do the discharge, and so that's why also when you look at this, you can't do that anymore because there's no more vote watch. But when you look at MEPs who are in court, they usually have a ton of report where they are rapporteur or shadow rapporteur, because every year there's 50 report, and so one or two MEPs will suddenly get one or two. A few MEPs will suddenly get for more or less for free 20, 30 file that then they can put under their stats. And so that means that in average, a count member on pure statistics has a much bigger, let's say, parliamentary output in terms of report, in terms of shadows, than other MEPs, than, let's say, regular MEPs. So that can a bit falsify, let's say, the perception on the how much MEPs actually work. It's one of those peculiarities of some committees. Well, speaking of discharge, she mentioned that there were problems with Frontex. So Frontex is the border agency. It's the biggest agency in the EU. I don't have the exact number, but I know that the objective is that Frontex hires like, I think 10,000 people. They want to have 10,000 people in Frontex, because they are the people like who are supposed to help on the borders, the external border of the EU. So of course you need a lot of people, and you can't exactly oversee the EU borders with 200 people. Well, that is pretty logical. But yeah, there's been a lot of scandals involving Frontex for, let's say, silent policy reasons, but also for questions of misuse of money, of EU money. And so Frontex is not having a good time these days. That's for sure. Between the misuse of money and the scandals on so-called pushback. So the fact that once an immigrant enters the country, you get him and you push him back outside the country, which is illegal. You're not supposed, once an immigrant enters the country, you're not supposed to push him back where he came from. You're supposed to deal with him within the country. You can't say, that's actually something that happens in Greece. They come from Turkey, and then the Greeks intercept the immigrants and say, well, no, actually, you're going back to Turkey. You're not staying in Greece. And so Frontex knew about it and did nothing, or even covered it up. So that's one of the main scandals on Frontex. And then there's the Court of Auditor. So that's, again, pretty ironic, because the Court of the Auditor is the EU institution that is in charge of auditing the EU in terms of its budget, whether EU budget is well used. And it turns out, according to press investigation done notably by Jean Quatremer, so the French journalist from Libération, who made it one of his personal crusade, who discovered that apparently the president of the EU Court of Auditors was, let's say, being pretty lax when it comes to perks and benefits coming with his job, like using, I don't want to say company cars, because the EU is not a company, but like institutional cars for his personal uses, the use of I don't know the English expression, but like flats, that apartments that you get for the purpose of your work. So he was apparently misusing that. So a bunch of things that were not going right. And after the revelation by Quatremer, Comte fell pretty hard on the president of the EU Court of Auditor, and it led to a political fight, because the president of the Court of Auditor is from the EPP, a German EPP, so the CDU. And so there were accusations that the EPP was actually trying to save its own soldier within the Court of Auditor, which led to the recommendation of Comte to be rejected by the plenary, because EPP and part of Renew united together to protect the president of the Court of Auditor, which pissed off quite a bit Quatremer, to say the least. What else do we have? We talked about intergroups, something that we had not discussed in the past as well. So intergroups, it's an official thing in the parliament. It's a bit peculiar. It's not a committee. It's not a an official committee. You won't, if you go on the page of your MEP on the Parliament website, you won't see intergroups, you will just see the committees. But intergroups are something that is official. At the beginning of the mandate, there is a big fight to create intergroups because you can only have a limited amount of intergroups in the Parliament. I don't remember the exact number, but let's say 20. Let's say that there can be only 20 intergroups in the Parliament, not one more. And so there is a big fight at the beginning of the mandate to decide what will be the intergroups. And so intergroups are thematic gathering of like-minded MEP. So you will have, for instance, an intergroup for MEP on anti-corruption. So you will have all the MEPs who are interested in anti-corruption policy will gather together in this intergroup. You have intergroups you have, I think, 2 or 3 intergroups on green policies, on environmental policy. You have one that is a classic, I think, on foodstuff, wine, everything related to food, agriculture. So you have a whole bunch of intergroups that show, to an extent, what are the themes, the thematic that are important to the eyes of MEPs. It's a way for it's important as a fighting beginner mandate because it gives a hint on what will be the priorities of MEPs. It's a way for MEPs to say, okay, this topic is very important. We want to work together on that. And so intergroups, once they're created, they're official. So that means that they have a budget given by the Parliament. They have a staff given, so civil servants of the EU will help manage the intergroup, these kind of things. And so within these intergroups, it's how can I explain this? It's a bit of a group of influence. See, it's composed of MEPs who are like-minded. So it's all MEPs who think it's important and want to work together on this. And so they will use intergroups to emulate, work together, and push together ideas. And so it's a way for intergroups are a way to influence the Parliament beside committees. So for instance, if on a file, let's say there's a file on anti-money laundering, of course it has implication on anti-corruption. So what will happen is that when there will be the amendments, you can have the members of the anti-corruption intergroup who will gather and say, okay, there is this anti-laundering directive that is being discussed in Cont. We need to propose something. We need to work together and propose something. Hi, Rosalogoi. Anti-intergroup secretariat also sometimes directly managed by external organization, NGOs. No. There can be partnership. I'm not sure because I think rules changed a bit because they used to be intergroups have some support from the Parliament, but they have the ability to associate themselves with external, so NGOs, other lobbies, etc. And so they can do a partnership to make it bigger. So for instance, you will have probably that will not apply to the anti-corruption intergroup, but let's say that you have an environmental intergroup. Then as part of this intergroup, you could have a partnership, a sort of sponsoring between the intergroup and an NGO or an external lobby. They will work together. They will get the NGO will pay a bit for some of the expense to, for instance, for events to facilitate the work of the intergroup because they consider that the intergroup will actually help their agenda, so they want to help the intergroup as a whole. And so it's a way to do the work of influence. But that's why I wasn't so sure. I'm not sure. There are now limits on how far can there be formal support in intergroups. I know that used to be the case in the past that there could be actual sponsoring of intergroups by lobbies, NGOs, etc. I think there might have been a change of rules. It does ring vaguely a bell on that, so I'm not certain. Definitely in the past it was a case. I'm not certain if it's still the case or if there has been limits introduced ever since. So we need to look into the rules of intergroups, but there is indeed a relation between intergroups and external bodies, because since intergroups are a mean of influence, they will align with external groups who will want to help. So to go back to my example, anti-corruption intergroup, there is this directive on money laundering. The intergroup will gather and say, okay, we need to push to write an amendment, and we will push it as an intergroup. And so let's say that the intergroup writes an amendment. Ms. Strugariu will arrive in court and say, okay, this is the amendment. It's supported by the intergroup of the Anticorruption Intergroup. So that means that they will have backup. So it will not be only Ms. Strugariu from Renew Europe pushing the amendment. It will be also the MEPs from the socialist part, the socialist group in the intergroup, who will go see their socialist colleagues, say, hey, MEP Strugariu tabled an amendment on this. It's important. You need to support that. Same thing in the EPP, same thing in GUE, same thing in the Greens. So it's a way then to then influence the work in the committees by saying, okay, this is pushed by the intergroup. It's important. There are MEPs behind that. And it's a way to share information, to do communication as well. So that's why they do events. And that's where lobbies and NGO can play a role, because they can help organize events and, let's say, raise awareness around the issue, push one way or another so that the Commission tackle the issue, the Parliament tackle the issue, etc. So it's intergroups is a way of a tool of influence to put something on the agenda and help MEPs work together on the same topic. So they can be pretty influential, very influential, even depending on the size of the intergroup. What else do I have? Oh, Moldova. So Moldova, country next to Ukraine, that is now officially candidate to join the EU as part of the package with Ukraine. Was pretty unthinkable a few years, or she said a few months ago. I would agree in the case of Moldova. If you have told me like January 2022, oh, Moldova is gonna have the status of a candidate country, I would have been like, the fuck? No, no, it's not going to. But it did. It did because of the war in Ukraine. That being said, it's gonna take some time for it to happen for many reasons. Because it's all negotiation. There needs to be reform done by Moldova. There's also a specific problem in Moldova, because Moldova has a separatist region that happens to be occupied by the Russians. So there's Transnistria, which is like a. Let me check if. No, it's gonna be a mess if I do that. But basically, it's a piece of the country that is de facto under Russian control, pretty much at the border between Moldova and Ukraine. And part of the reason why there was a push by the Russians in the south of Ukraine was to allow for territorial continuity between Russia, Crimea, and Transnistria, so in Moldova. So they wanted to go south to ensure that there was territorial continuity, and so that Russians could easily move stuff to Crimea and to Transnistria, and so freeze the situation to their advantage. So that's why there was a big focus on the south when on the south in the war in Ukraine, and still is a lot of focus there. But yeah, Moldova is going to take quite some time, I would say, to join the. Even if they are doing all the efforts that they need, the reforms that they need, there are, of course, the situation in Ukraine that will impact, like Mr. Strugariu said. There's Transnistria that also plays a role, and then on top of that, you have the internal problems of the EU that the EU needs to deal with, like. It's been like a common discussion these days. The EU is already struggling to function at 27. Can we push it at 30, 36 members states with the same rules? No, the EU needs to first sort its own shit and reform its functioning so that it can work better already at 27, and then in the future when there will be more. So that's put the question of the treaty reforms, which is a complete honestness, and it's not going to happen anytime soon, I would say. And then on top of that, you have national politics because, of course, to have a member state join, so if to Moldova, even if Moldova ticks all the boxes, then all member state needs to say, okay, I agree with Moldova join the EU. And in quite a few cases, that would be politically sensitive. Like take countries like the Netherlands, Denmark, France. If you put that to the referendum, I'm not sure what people would vote on this. So there are national politics also playing into that, where it can be politically toxic for government to agree to enlargement, at least for the time being. Even if there is we see that in the new Eurobarometer that was released, there is, because of the war in Ukraine, a progression in the acceptation by the population of the possibility of an enlargement, but it's still not. It doesn't solve everything. Like in France, still a minority. Even if in France, I had looked the statistics. Eurobarometer says that 40% of people would support an enlargement of the EU. That's a progression of 12 points already compared to the previous Eurobarometer. So that means that before it was only 32, and it's still not a majority. So there's still work to be done on public opinions on topic of enlargement that is politically toxic in a number of countries. And finally, what did we discuss? State of the Union. I think she was right in her assessment of what is expected from van der Leyen next week. Like there will be a clear focus on Ukraine, of course, on energy, the energy crisis, on the food crisis, and people will expect very concrete proposals. They won't be happy, or they won't consider it enough to have let's say grand speeches, very meta, very stratospheric. They will want very concrete proposals, and we see like today, van der Leyen announced already proposals to tackle the energy crisis, because that's the energy crisis is the big political topic for the EU in the coming month. That's for sure. It's going to be the top priority. Thanks for the such question. If it's appropriate for the time, yeah, I mean, definitely, it was definitely appropriate. I mean, and that was a question that, in any case, I would have probably asked. I mean, I asked it to the last guest. It was pretty normal that we'd ask to this one. But yeah, I mean, I don't know why. I don't know if it's because the guest these last couple of interviews take a long time to answer question, or if I don't know how to manage my time anymore. But like half the question I had planned to ask, I didn't have time to ask them, so I need to be less prolific, maybe on my questions, or push MEPs to answer in 1 minute and no more. But yeah, that's pretty much all the notes I had for today. I hope that you enjoyed the interview. It was interesting. I think it's the first time we discussed like anti-corruption, anti-laundering money. We talked about Compte, we talked about Intergroup, so that those are things that we did not have a chance to discuss in the past. Next stream is going to be next week, because I'm not restarting yet the Sunday streams. It's going to be at the end of September. So the next stream we will have together is, let me check my calendar, next Tuesday, so the 13th, is going to be an interview with a Portuguese Greens, Francisco Guerreiro. Paduga, you missed the stream. Oh, don't worry about it. There's a replay. It's there for that. And then after that, they will be on Wednesday, so for SO2, there will be for sure a stream on the State of the Union in the evening. I'm not sure yet what, because I'm trying to put together a debate. So I'm inviting MEP left, right, and center. So either it's going to be a debate between MEPs on what they thought and how they analyze the State of the Union, or it's going to be a stream with just me and you chatting about what was proposed, what was announced by the State of the Union, answer your question about that. So yeah, I have to run after MEPs still to have answers. Like for now, I have 2 MEPs who are interested in doing the debate. I need to find at least 1 more, ideally 2. But yeah, I need to run after people. Hopefully, fingers crossed, it's gonna happen. Otherwise, there's still gonna be a stream. It's just me talking about the State of the Union. But yeah, that's the program. Any questions or comments before we conclude? 2 is enough, allows for longer answers. That 2 MEPs is the format that I usually prefer, indeed, because it allows for longer answers and also for it's less of a mess. But for the State of the Union, given that it's the big political speech, I think it's important to have a bit more. Ideally, I would like to have MEPs from 1 MEP for MPP, 1 EPP for 1 Renew MEP, 1 Socialist, 1 Greens. I tried the ECR, but the ECR couldn't because it's the big political speech and the political groups have things to say on that. So I would say it would be fair to give the opportunity for each group to give its opinion. So it's a matter to find MEPs. Like for now, I have 1 EPP and 1 Greens who are interested in participating, and ideally I would like to have at least 1 Socialist and 1 Renew. ECR I tried. The person I contacted was not could not do it, unfortunately. So well. Again, I will try to do my best, and I will let you know how it goes. Otherwise, well, let's conclude. I hope you liked the interview as usual, the discussion and all that. As usual, if you liked what you saw, you can follow the channel and the rest of my social media. You have the link there: Discord, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all the good things. You just have to click and you're there. Well, if you liked it even more, you can even subscribe. You can toss a coin to your streamer on Coffee. You can give any support that you can and want. That's always very much appreciated. It's not quote. It's well, quote only works if you are subscribers. Only subscriber can use the comment for quotes and facts. Otherwise, it's me who can do that. There, you have one for free. Subscribe for the next one. Anyway, I wish you all a good evening, and I will see you all next week on Tuesday at 6:45 according to my calendar. But you'll get the information on Twitter and Discord as usual. Have a good one, guys. See you next week. Bye.